Welcome to What About PS, a Poland Syndrome podcast, where we talk about all things Poland Syndrome. The episodes that you can look forward to in this podcast speak about the male and female experience, motherhood and breastfeeding, general day-to-day living, health and fitness, and also including hand and chest affected people who have Poland Syndrome. If you have Poland Syndrome, or if you know of someone who has Poland Syndrome, then be sure to have a look out and listen to our latest episodes. Thank you guys for coming back to another episode of PIP. And today we're going to be talking to Gunnar about his experience with Poland Syndrome and his experience specifically in relation to fitness and health. So Gunnar, thank you so much for joining us today. And before we get started, if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do, and nice little intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. This is really exciting to get to talk. I feel like I've talked so much to people in social media comments and just kind of faceless people that it's really nice to actually come on and talk about specifically about this. So thank you for that. But my name's Gunnar. I'm based in Los Angeles, and I'm a social media influencer and personal trainer. And my niche in the social media sphere is fitness in relation to like body positivity, dealing with what makes us different. And the thing that makes me different is Poland Syndrome.
Mm-hmm. You know, before we were coming on, I was saying to Sam, it's going to be such an interesting conversation because I know bodybuilding in general has, a lot of people who do it have bad experiences with body dysmorphia. And that's generally kind of like even for your atypical, body type. So it's going to be interesting to hear your experience with that as someone who has Poland Syndrome, and then also someone who's a bodybuilder as well. But before we get into that, when were you diagnosed? How was your diagnosis story? How did that go for you?
So I was diagnosed before I was even able to remember it. So my parents, the way I've been told the story is my parents were concerned because I had like a little dip in the chest, and they thought it could be something with the way the ribs were forming together or something like that. I think I was maybe 2, and they took me to the doctor's office, and he said, "Oh, it's something called Poland Syndrome. No need to worry. It doesn't cause anything like life-threatening or anything to threaten health." And I've just kind of grown up knowing that's what I have.
Were your ribs affected as well? Is it just your chest? Okay.
No, I have a really, really mild case. I'm missing, I think I'm like half of the pec major. So like, if this is like your pec muscle and then you have like half, that was the way I was explained. So very, very minor, minorly affected.
That's interesting because I obviously only really knew it from my experience, and I think I have the same thing as you. I think I'm only missing, the pec major. And on another podcast episode, we were chatting to some other guys who are athletes. So one's a gymnast, and the other guy was a cricket player, and the other guy was a Paralympian. And the cricket player, Lewis Hatchett, I'm not too sure if you have seen him on Instagram, but he's chest affected, but he's also he's also affected on the rib cage as well. And so when he was playing cricket, he had to actually wear like a body cover that covered his ribs so that the ball wouldn't hit him and, cause injury. So it's interesting. It's been interesting to see how it presents differently in different people.
Yeah, that's been kind of the most frustrating thing about it, is because I feel like there's like 10 disorders that are kind of lumped into Poland Syndrome. It's like you're missing either the pec, but also your hand can be smaller, or you can be born with like a nub for a hand, or like, one of your legs can be shorter, or you're missing ribs. And I'm like, part of me is like, I feel like there should be different designations for these different things, because it's such a wide group of, I guess, I don't want to call them deformities, but I mean, abnormalities, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was really frustrating to kind of pinpoint okay, well, how am I exactly affected? And I think one of the big things that I was concerned with when I was a kid was, oh, are these things going to come later? Like, is this like the beginning of it? Or is this kind of like, is this where it stops? Is this something that continues to develop? And there's no answers. There's so little information on it. I come across so many people on a weekly, sometimes daily basis that, number one, don't know what it's called. They've never been told why they're missing a portion of their pec, why they look a little bit different. Or I come across somebody who says, hey, I do have Poland syndrome, but I'm also missing my left hand on the affected side. And the severity is so different from case to case.
So it's really interesting how you kind of differentiating abnormality and deformity. For me, I love what you're saying because it is really different. And for me, because I have such a mild case, I feel like it's unfair to almost say I have a deformity because I don't have any really challenges in life, especially compared to someone who's maybe hand affected. Is that something that you also kind of struggled with, maybe labeling or feeling that it was almost like I have this, but it's not as bad?
Yes and no, because first of all, like you, I consider myself very lucky that it's not like a worse case. But I think deformity is just kind of a nasty word. I think it implies like, I don't know, some sort of like disfigurement. And I think if you're going to apply it to, I don't know, maybe I've just come to kind of, I don't want to be labeled as someone who has a deformity because I don't really see it that way. Some people certainly do. I mean, my God, read the comments on my social media posts. Some people think it's like the most hideous thing they've ever seen in their life. And, but an abnormality seems, I don't know, much more tolerable, I guess. Not just for me, but like for people that are, I would hate to meet somebody who has Poland syndrome and say they're chest affected, hand affected, and then they say it's a deformity. That would just kind of make me sad for them.
Yeah.
And if I don't qualify it as that, maybe that kind of, or maybe if I refer to it as an abnormality, maybe that will help other people say, oh, well, I don't really need to label myself as deformed. I can, just a little abnormal. I don't know. It goes down easier, I guess.
Yeah. And you know what? No, and I'm sure obviously you know this being in the bodybuilding world, no person's body is symmetrical to the point where it's identical. So it's kind of like everyone is kind of abnormal then, if you think about it. Yeah.
And I think, I guess we just have like an abnormality target on our back because, it's something noticeable. And it's different. I guess everybody, has some sort of asymmetry going on, but for us, it's more visible. So I guess people can kind of point it out easier.
As a female, it was definitely easier hiding it growing up. I had surgery when I was 18. So it was just a matter of me, making certain clothes choices or, it was easy for me to cover up growing up. But as a guy, it's a lot harder because, you take your shirt off, you go to the pool, there's only so much you can hide. How is that process for you growing up and dealing with that?
Well, and if we can circle back to, I'm fascinated to talk to a woman about it because I've never heard a woman's experience with it. So let me circle back to you after I answer. But it was very easy when I was a kid because nobody really cared. And I didn't really understand that something was wrong. And then it was like a light switch flipped as soon as I got into like middle school, where people actually start to care about the way they look. And I guess you go through puberty, you start developing a little bit of muscle, even if it's just the smallest bit. And I was I mean, I can put my fingers around my wrist. I have like a small frame. I'm not meant to hold like a ton of extra weight. I was probably weighing 130 pounds my freshman, sophomore, junior year of high school. So I kept myself super thin. And it wasn't really until I started lifting weights that it became more and more noticeable. And every once in a while, people would notice it, but it was self-driven, this insecurity of like taking your shirt off at the pool, because I knew it was different. I don't know if anybody else would have known, because I was really thin. I mean, you could see my rib cage on the side that did have a pec. It was like, I was tall and lanky, and I think the insecurities kind of manifested in my own head, and then the reality of people actually coming up to me and being like, "What's wrong with your chest?" was much less than I probably felt that it was, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And it's interesting how, so you're saying when you started building muscle, it became more noticeable than if you weren't building muscle.
Which is kind of ironic, because I started bodybuilding because I wanted to overcome any insecurity that I had about the missing pec, because I wanted to build a physique that would be like, quote unquote, impressive, even with a missing pec, or maybe more so with a missing pec, when it just made it more noticeable. So it's just kind of like chasing my tail there a little bit.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting because, the gymnast that I was speaking to, he was saying, the leaner he gets during competition, the more noticeable it gets from him. But obviously he's leaning out with muscle. So it's not like you're just lean and you have no muscle. So that is very interesting.
Yeah. And I definitely think if I kind of let things slip for a little bit, like I was just on vacation for a couple weeks, and I did not adhere to like my usual diet routine. I was actually lifting more. I was going more frequently than I usually do, just because I've had nothing else to do for a little bit. And I was taking creatine, and I was eating whatever I wanted to. And I did put on like 11 pounds in a month and a half, and it got softer. The difference between it softened up a little bit. And then when I get really lean again, that's when when everything's sharp, the drop off on the muscle is really sharpened too.
Yeah. And did you do sports growing up, or did you only start weight training when you started the bodybuilding and the gym training?
I played sports growing up because my dad wanted me to. I wasn't interested in them. I wasn't good at them. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, I will never be good at them because I don't have a fully developed chest. I don't have a full body. How could I ever be good at sports? And it wasn't until weightlifting that I got into, I actually started paying attention to it and actually enjoying it. I think everything else was just more or less kind of pushed into it.
Yeah. It's really interesting because so a little bit of kind of my experience with it is I was the same. So I was diagnosed when I was a few months old. My mom was giving me a bath, and it almost looked like my shoulder had dislocated because it was like rolling back. And she went through the traumatic experience of being accused of abusing me, which I think is every mom's nightmare. But not justifying that at all. But, we were very lucky in the sense that the person who ended up diagnosing me knew what Poland syndrome was, because if you listen to, Sam and a lot of other people that come onto the podcast, the doctors don't know what it is. So they go their whole lives either diagnosing themselves online or, just not actually ever knowing what's going on. And so we're very lucky in that case. And because of that, I think, my parents always told me about it. It was never made into a thing. But the doctors did say to my parents, get her into swimming as soon as possible so she can build upper body strength. And so that was kind of like the catalyst for me growing up. I was an athlete my whole life. I, loved training, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that really taught me to value what my body can do over what it could look like. And so for me growing up, it was never, Yeah, I say I hid it growing up, but that was more of a thing of I don't want to give people the option to, say things, even though they probably wouldn't have, because like you're saying, sometimes it's bigger in your head than it is in reality. But that was my experience with it. I learned very much to appreciate what my body could do rather than what it looks like. And I'm very grateful for my parents for teaching me that. Do you have a similar experience with that going into the weight training?
I just that's really interesting that your doctor said prioritize upper body strength, because I was never given any advice on how to cope with it. I was never given any advice on how to make like it easier. Maybe because they recognized that it was like a partially undeveloped muscle. But there was no, that's actually such good advice to someone who has Poland syndrome, to really prioritize upper body strength so that you can, build up the surrounding muscles and be a little bit more stable. And that's basically what I tell people all the time when they reach out to me, but I never thought about it from like as advice to like that I should have gotten when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think for me it was very different. It was very much like I just want to hide it. I just want to not answer any questions about it. I just want no one to notice. And if I can just skate by and not play sports and not stand out and not, go to the pool all the time, then maybe nobody will notice. And I think that festered in my head. And then when I got to college, it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do when we have like pool parties and when I go to the beach with my friends or things like that? And if you look at photos of me in college, there's so many photos where I'm like holding a drink or something this way, or I'll like perch on someone's shoulder so it's not like super noticeable. And I got sick of that. I felt like I got so sick of it. And I felt like it was so much effort to try and hide it rather than the effort that it was taking to hide it was much more than the effort it would have taken to just explain to someone in one sentence, oh yeah, I have a birth defect. And maybe it comes with getting older, or you just don't really care as much about what people think, or your insecurities kind of wither away. But that was the jumping off point for social media, was I am going to get rid of this insecurity by putting it out there for everyone in the world to see. And I didn't have a plan. I just thought if I just put it out there like one time, it would be enough.
Yeah. Yeah. How was that mental shift though, from going from, one extreme of wanting to hide it and then going on social media and, putting it out there?
People ask me this quite a bit. And it's more from a perspective of somebody asking like, how did you do it so that I can do it? And I never know how to answer the question. But it was literally like overnight. And it was right when social media was starting to blow up. Well, not social media, but Instagram was getting really, really big. Specifically, fitness Instagram was getting really big. And I was already, I'm like probably 4 or 5 years into weight training at this point. And I was really into pumping iron. I was really into like Arnold Schwarzenegger in like the 70s, 80s bodybuilding. And I saw the potential to create kind of a fitness oriented page. And I was like, oh, but I can't do that because I have this missing pec. No one will like it. I would out myself. And then it was kind of a discussion in my head of, well, does that really matter anymore? Do you really need to hide it? Can we just let it go? And I made one post and it got like 10 likes and like one comment. And then I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. And then it just kind of like snowballed from there. I was like, oh, and it slowly kind of shed the insecurities of it. And then I was posting really early on and going onto YouTube and just kind of talking to the camera about my workouts. I wasn't really highlighting the fact that I was missing a pec. And I was, I guess I was covered for most of it. And then I made one post about how it was actually affecting me and how it was like different to work out this way. And then one really big it was before the term influencer was a thing, but he was a really big social media influencer. His name is Artemis. He saw me and he was really impressed with like the fact that I had built around it. And he started posting about me. And then I did a couple that led it just kind of a snowball effect. And that, I think, seeing that take off and seeing that it could turn into like a business potential, and seeing other influencers in the fitness space turning their profiles into businesses was kind of a launching point, and kind of a place where I was like, oh, well, I could use this. I could monetize this almost. But then the messages started coming in about like how, similar to what you were saying, people had never seen it before. And then I started meeting others. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one out here. I'm not alone. There's other people. And then it became kind of more along the lines of something that can actually help people.
Yeah. Do you remember the first person that you met, even online, that had Poland syndrome?
Yeah, this is actually really embarrassing. But I found the first several people that I met were all from India.
Okay.
It was like, I think like the first 30 people. And
with Poland syndrome?
With Poland syndrome. Yes.
Wow.
We're all from India. And I thought, oh my gosh, this must be really prevalent in India. And I think, I did research, and there was no like indication of, oh, this is more popular in India, this is more common in India. But I kept getting these messages, like literally like 10 a day. And then I realized that I had gone viral on some Indian YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And I had just been exposed to more people in India. Yeah. But it was, I was really convinced that it was like very prevalent in India for a little bit.
That's so interesting, because out of all the people that I've met, actually majority of them come from Eastern Europe, mm-hmm. Which is interesting, or, Scandinavian regions. I don't think I've actually met another Indian person or have heard of another Indian person in the PIP community. So that'll be awesome to, reach out to them and kind of just show them what we're doing and give them a community to be a part of. But that just shows you how many people actually have it. And I don't think a lot of people speak about it. And I think that's why the information that's out there isn't as true as it could be, because I think people aren't reporting it, or they're hiding it, or they don't know what it is, so they don't know how to report it. And that's why a lot more research is coming out. And I think that will be beneficial for people in the future if, they have kids with Poland syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, like, I told you earlier, it was impossible to find information on it. But what has your experience been like with your outreach? Like, do you find that most people are in the UK or in Europe, or are you finding them kind of worldwide?
So I'd say a majority from the US.
Interesting.
And Europe. A
okay.
mix. I don't actually think I've met another South African with Poland syndrome. I'm sure if there's maybe a community that pops up here, everyone will start to kind of come out, but mainly the US and Europe. But that's all kind of been through PIP. The people that I chat to that reach out to me on Instagram are generally from Eastern Europe. So I don't know if that's just kind of like the Instagram algorithm, where that's just where my feed is popping up. But it's going to, I think it is. I think it has to do, I think you'll probably find there'll be populations of it everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of people kind of coming out and it becoming more of a known thing, like like you're saying, you didn't have any information on it growing up, and the world is just kind of getting more tech savvy now, so it's bound to kind of grow with it, with certain charities. On that, which is quite interesting, because with my parents, so they obviously had the doctor that kind of briefed them, told them what to do. They asked the same questions, should we be concerned, and is there any other kind of health issues that we can expect? And the doctor was like, no, it's just this muscle, so just be prepared to have a conversation with her when she starts developing, but try and get her to hold out for surgery until she's 18. So they very much had like a clear expectation of what to expect with me emotionally, but also physically. And then I think that really helped them as well, because you can imagine, as parents, your child has just been diagnosed with something. It's not common enough for normal doctors in the hospital to know what it is. And now you're all of a sudden going to be worried that there's going to be, other complications that arise. And so I know for them, they said having the doctor tell them exactly what to expect, what not to expect, really put them at ease. How was that, experience for you and your parents? Because I know you were saying you didn't really have a lot of information going into it. Whereas for me, I knew my whole life I was going to get a surgery at 18, and it just was fact. How is that for you and your parents?
My mom's going to kill me for this answer, and I'm sure she'll listen to this. But
sorry, Mom.
my mom, my grandfather was a doctor, and once Poland syndrome was kind of ruled out as, okay, it's just an aesthetic thing, it's not going to affect health, I think my mom kind of just wrote it off as not a big deal. She was like, okay, cross that bridge, it's not going to affect health. And then there were so many other things that she was worried that I may have. I had migraines when I was a kid. I've had migraines since I was in first grade. And I think just the general worries of, maybe, sorry, mom, overprotective single mom, kind of took over the worry of any discussion of Poland syndrome. And then it kind of turned into something that was kind of brushed aside, like, oh, well, you could work out. Oh, well, you can get an implant. Oh, you can get it fixed if you really want to. And it was never really something we talked about. Whenever it did come up, it was like, yeah, they have implants if you really want to get it fixed. And that was kind of it. If it wasn't like a serious illness, or something that required antibiotics, it really wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. Do you feel, and I think this is so personal, I think everyone is different, because, from my side, like, again, it wasn't made into a thing. So if we chatted about it, it was more of, as an example, my parents will see me lifting a certain weight and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And then they're like, that's even more incredible because you don't have this muscle, etc. So it was more of like a matter of fact, and wow, look what you could do despite of. Other than that, we never really spoke about it in terms of emotion. And for me, that worked. For you, did that work as well? Or would you have liked to maybe have had more conversations about it?
I think I was so eager to ignore it and so eager to just never talk about it. I really didn't have that many questions about it, at least until I started lifting weights. And then it was kind of, but even then, I feel like my dad just never really cared either way if I had it or not. He was always just kind of, oh, you're lifting a lot of weight now. You're bulking up a lot. And I think he was so ecstatic that I had found a sport. And that I wasn't just a theater kid. Because he comes from like a huge football family and I was more into acting and writing. And I think he was just so relieved by the time that I found weightlifting that it just didn't really come up. And I honestly don't remember the last time he even mentioned it. I mean, I really couldn't I can't think of one conversation that my dad and I have had about it. My mom and I were very much like, as I got older, you know, the surgery discussion was on the table more and more. But my dad was never really, it was almost like he was trying to like, either he didn't care, like it wasn't a big deal to him, or he was just trying to ignore it because he didn't really know how to approach the conversation. I don't know which.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes tough for parents because they try and find that balance as well of, I don't want to, you know, make my child feel like it's this massive deal or that they can't do things. And at the same time, I want to, you know, find that balance. But something I want to kind of touch on, what was your process of deciding whether or not you wanted surgery? Honestly, I didn't even know that there were surgery options available for men until I spoke to the guys on the other podcast. So that's really fascinating, but I'd love to hear your kind of, you know, thought process through that.
I thought, my thought process was always, it was kind of always grass is greener on the other side kind of things. Like, oh my gosh, if I could get this surgery, I would be able to do so much more. Oh my gosh, because the goal was always to be an actor. The goal was always to go to Hollywood and, be on screen or be writing. And I felt like if I had the surgery, if I could look like everybody else that was trying to do the thing, I would have such a better shot. And I would be so much more confident and I would feel so much better, and life would just be this like perfect place. And then I started to do research on it, and I met with a couple plastic surgeons, and the options they gave me were just never, no one ever told me, oh yeah, this surgery will make you look absolutely symmetrical. Your you know, life is going to be good from here on out. They really gave me this kind of bleak outlook on surgery. And there were a couple different options. There was one that was like a silicone implant, kind of similar to like a breast implant. And then that was kind of like generic, and that was like the cheapest option, I think. And then there was an option where they could map the other side and basically make like a mirror image of the other side. And then there was an option where they could basically do liposuction on another part of your body and inject fat into the space just to like fill it. But the one thing they kept telling me is it's, you know, I've developed the upper chest so much, it's never going to like be perfectly symmetrical. Like, I guess there's no way to like connect them and make an implant like kind of flow into the muscle. Like, it will never be like that smooth kind of surface that you see on somebody who's, you know, naturally with two pec muscles. And I think it just kind of, I think it was a huge letdown. I remember feeling so kind of, well, if it's never going to look quite right, what's the point in changing it? And then they told me, you know, it's never going to affect your strength. It's never going to like change like any functionality that you have. Not that I'm really lacking any functionality and I'm plenty strong. It's like, that was never the goal. But once I kind of figured out it's just kind of to make you feel a little bit better. And it's probably not going to look right. Not saying it won't look right on anybody else. Not saying it doesn't on you, but on my specific build, they were like, it's not going to be what you think it's going to be. And and that was like a year-long process of meeting with different surgeons, because I did it right when I was like 19 years old. I think I had just gone to college, maybe like between my freshman and sophomore year of college.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting because, again, I think for girls, it's obviously a cosmetic. There's a cosmetic reason behind it, but I think there's also like a practical reason behind it in terms of the clothes that we wear and everything. So I know when I was on that journey, I remember it so clearly. I was 16. Obviously, I was preparing for it. And it was at that time where we had to go to consultations. And the first doctor we went to, I know Sam has heard the story thousands of times. It was this male doctor, which was scary in itself because obviously he has to do a body exam. And as a 16-year-old girl, that's not a comfortable situation. But what made it even worse was his solution to the problem. I remember he took it out of his drawer, the implants, and like threw it on the table, and he was like, "Cool, we're gonna do both sides, D cups." And I'm like, I'm so small, guys. I weigh, I don't know what it is in pounds, but I was weighing like 56 kgs, already lean from sport. Like there's no way I was near a D cup. And doing it on both sides was it was that I remember going back and crying, because I was also someone that I like naturalistic approaches to things. So already having something foreign in my body was quite scary. And my mom was like, obviously we're not going to go through with that, guy. So we went and we got a second opinion, and the lady I ended up seeing, she, her approach was a lot more organic and natural. So they put in half an implant. And then I was supposed to have a second procedure where they did the fat transfer, which I decided not to have, because at least with half the implant, I could wear my clothes normally and it was fine. Like things were fine, like it fitted fine. I remember I didn't want to get the second surgery because I couldn't train for 6 weeks after the first surgery. And I was like, I don't want to go through that again. But, the second one was more for kind of like filling the top part. So it's definitely more for cosmetic than functionality. And for me, I'm happy with the way I look. So, but it's interesting to see, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think people should do what makes them feel confident and what makes them feel happy. I know there's a lot of people out there, a lot of girls that have Poland syndrome that opt not to get the surgery, because I think, the procedure behind it is also complicated because everyone's getting it in different countries and the doctors know different things. And I know in the Poland syndrome community, especially, there's been a lot of complications with surgery. So people are, just opting not to have it as well. So it is, I think, a very complex situation. And I think, it's awesome that you could go through it and not, you're happy with how you are and how you look, and you can find confidence in that.
Well, it depends on the day, but and forgive me, I have questions, and if you're uncomfortable answering, but
no, I'm an open book.
the Poland syndrome affects the muscle. So did you have like breast tissue on top of the lack of muscle?
Yeah. So it wasn't like, so obviously the muscle was gone. So everything was a lot smaller. So there was something there, but it wasn't enough to, like, if I was wearing a bra, it was almost like I was wearing a bra that was 3 times too big on that side. So that's why it was more of convenience.
Okay. So they did like the muscle implant and then did like a regular like breast implant.
No. So they didn't do a muscle implant. They did the silicone implant that I think, if I'm not mistaken, goes on top of the muscle underneath the fat. So they didn't touch my muscle or anything. So
interesting.
Yeah. So they didn't touch my muscles, or just a normal implant.
Interesting. I have such few women that reach out to me. I have yet to kind of tap into the female Poland syndrome audience.
Yeah.
But I know that there are everybody I've met, every male that I've met that has had the surgery, and I've met more that have not than have, but everybody that has had it has either had to have it redone, or they have just kind of crazy complications with it. And there seems to be like a lot of like draining issues and scar tissue issues that kind of arise, especially with people that got it maybe a little bit too early. And then they've had to go in, and maybe their chest has grown and the implant obviously doesn't grow with you. So they've had to redo it. And it just seems like, I mean, like you said, I want anybody who's affected with it, whatever's going to make you feel better, whatever's going to make you feel more confident, do whatever needs to be done to achieve that. But the complication stories that I've heard about it are just kind of wild. And maybe that's because a lot of these guys are doing it because they're already working out, and maybe the adding training on top of a pretty substantial implant is leading to more complications faster than it should. But I don't know.
Yeah. I think again, this will be interesting for further research, because I don't think anyone's really done research on that. I know from my experience that, like what you were saying, the implant can't grow with you. So for me, I know I sometimes joke with my fiance, I'm like, Trav, I can't get any leaner because there's going to be a discrepancy, and
Yeah.
there's nothing I can do about that. So I think, I think anyone who is listening to this and they're kind of, bouncing back and forth between surgery or not surgery, I think go and get multiple opinions. Don't just take one doctor's word for it. And just understand that if you do go the surgical route, it is a surgery. So there will be, risks or complications. Or I know with the implants, you generally have to go 10 years, like every 10 years, you have to go and get it checked up again and redone and everything. So I would definitely say do your research on that. It is interesting because I've never seen a guy with an implant for Poland syndrome. I've only really heard about it for girls. And I think guys obviously train their chest a lot more than girls. So I wonder if there would be more complications on that side.
That's what I was saying. Maybe the implant wasn't designed to, because it is the same. It's the same surgery. It's the same implant. And maybe it's not designed to have like a barbell bouncing off of it, twice a week or something like that.
Yeah.
It is interesting though. I mean, not to stay too long on the surgery topic, but living in Los Angeles, there are a lot of people that have surgery for all kinds of stuff. And there are a lot of like muscular implants that I've seen for people that don't have Poland syndrome. So, I mean, I see people with deltoid implants. I see people with ab implants, that it's just, I think it's, if ever there was a place to have it done by a doctor who's familiar with it, this is probably the place to do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's very interesting. That's wild. I feel like we could just go on. There's so many questions here that I haven't even been able to ask you. So hopefully we can jump on for another episode. But before we go, firstly, I wanted to ask, what has been your biggest challenge with Poland syndrome, and what advice would you give to someone who has it and wants to kind of learn how to live with it and deal with that potential body dysmorphia or those bad days, like you were saying?
The biggest challenge is just, I think, and this probably goes hand in hand with anybody who's feeling any sort of way about the way they look or their body, whether they're different or whether they look, quote unquote normal. But our society puts such an emphasis on looking a certain way. And I think there was just kind of this fundamental understanding from a really early age that I would never look the way that I thought I was supposed to look, or like I would never look the way that, this is kind of an obscure reference, but I love the Indiana Jones movies. And
my fiance loves them. He just watched the latest one.
Oh yeah. Well, the first one is my favorite movie ever. And I used to dress up like him as a kid all the time. And he always wears his shirt, like all buttoned down all the way to like his stomach. And just the fact that I knew that I would always have like something so silly, like if I want to dress up like Indiana Jones as a kid, something's going to look different. If I want to wear a sweater, something's going to look just a little bit different. It's like, it was so frustrating and so just defeating, I guess, to know that you would never quite look the way that you wanted to look. Or so I think that was probably the most, and the body dysmorphia that comes along with it, I think is very challenging too, because everybody has body dysmorphia to some extent. Some people have like a very severe case of it where they can look at themselves in the mirror and see somebody, 45 pounds heavier. it varies person to person. But to me, it was like, it never mattered how lean or how muscular or how developed other muscles were, because I would never be able to develop that one spot. And so it was just like, there were certain points where I was like, why even bother? Because I'm never going to be totally happy with it. So what's the point of putting in the work? What's the point of trying to achieve a certain level of strength or a certain level of muscularity? And if you're never going to be quite satisfied, if I'm always going to have this glaring issue. And that was tough to kind of wrap your head around. And I imagine it's the same, like I said, for anybody dealing with any sort of body shaming or body dysmorphia, whatever you want to call it. But I think, to connect that to your other question, I think working out really did build the confidence. And I think my advice to anyone who does have it is just find ways to build confidence, because that was what was able to kind of get me out of my shell and stop hiding it. And I guess finding something that you're good at, finding that skill that you have that, kind of sets you apart from the pack, and honing that and becoming, an expert at something, and building your confidence based on something that you're good at, was really helpful to me. And if it's something that you're good at, that you enjoy, like I got really lucky because I really enjoy weightlifting. I really enjoy working out. And I really enjoy helping others do it. And it just so happened that it would be kind of a motivational thing to other people to see me doing it. But even like screenwriting, I'm very proud of the work that I've done there, and I'm very confident in that arena. And I think just finding what you're good at, learning to excel at it, and building your confidence through that.
Yeah, I love that. Such great advice. Gunnar, thank you so much for taking time and chatting to me, and
yeah, absolutely.
Being vulnerable and sharing your experiences and your thoughts with everyone listening. I know they'll appreciate it, and they'll take, a lot from it, which is why we do this. So
I hope so.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you so much. And it'll be great to have you on for another episode, because like I said, there were so many questions I didn't even get to. But for now, thank you so much, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us and subscribe to our podcast, and follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook. See you soon.